This is a no-nonsense guide on how you can solve a Rubik's Cube in under 10 seconds. I used this exact same formula when I first started cubing to go from my first solve ever to a sub-10 official average in under 6 months of cubing. So watch closely and stay to the end because I'll be sharing a mistake that I made which is still hurting my solve times today and how you can avoid doing the same thing. If you're watching this video, I assume you're already sub 1 on 3x3. Therefore, the first step of this method is to learn cfop if you haven't already. Cfop is a 4-step method for solving the cube in which each letter stands for one step. So C stands for cross, F stands for first 2 layers, O stands for orientation of the last layer, and P stands for permutation of the last layer. This is the method that almost all of the top cubers use to get solves under 6, 5 or even 4 seconds, so this should definitely be good enough for us to get sub 10. I'll link a playlist of videos in the description which I learned cfop from when I first started cubing a few years ago. The second step is to get really good at each step of cfop, and the way I'd approach this would be double-sided. First, I would start by setting some targets for how fast I want each step to be in order to consider it fast enough to be sub 10. And my list would go something like this: for cross between 1 and 1.5 seconds, for F12 between 4 and 5 seconds, for OLL between 1 and 1.5 seconds, and for PLL between 1 and 2 seconds. Now when they add all of these up, this would mean that an average solve for you would be sub 10. Okay, now we know what we're aiming for, we can figure out how to achieve those splits. Firstly, for cross, I'd suggest learning how to plan your cross in inspection and how to solve it in under 8 moves every time. This is a list of how you can do exactly that. First, learn the few different ways of inserting cross edges, then start trying your best to plan your cross fully before each solve no matter how long it takes. You now have a good base for your cross, and this is where you can start to think about how you can insert 1 to 2 extra moves in order to solve multiple edges with that same key insert, or maybe cancelling moves into your solution, or exploring different ways of inserting cross edges which will make your cross more efficient overall. Once you've gotten really good at planning your cross in inspection, you can start to think about extending that into planning your cross and your first F12 pair in your 15 seconds of inspection. For the second step of cfop, I would again suggest a multi-angled approach. Firstly, take your cube and sit down somewhere with no distractions. No phones, no laptops, not even a stack mat, and just play around with different ways of pairing up pieces. Look at the intuitive F12 solutions you already know, and figure out how you can modify them to reduce move count or rotations. This is great for the more simple cases, but for some of the tougher cases, I'd suggest learning actual algs for them. When you're learning these, try to understand what the algorithm's actually doing and how it's affecting the cube, rather than just knowing the algorithm. Anyway, I'll link a document in the description which was made by JPerm with the best algs for every F12 case you can encounter. The two last steps of the method, the approach I took was pretty similar for both of them. Since you've already learnt 2-look OLO and PLL from basic cfop, I suggest learning all the PLL algorithms and how to recognize them quickly, and then train them with a last layer trainer to build confidence with them. Once you've done this for all the PLL algs, move on to OLO and repeat the same process. After you've learnt all the algs and are comfortable doing them in solves, you can start to work on learning 2-sided PLL recognition, which is where you can recognize any PLL case from any angle around the cube with only the 2 sides that you can see without doing any extra moves or rotations. This is more so just an optimization, but it saves valuable time which becomes crucial as you get faster. You can practice 2-sided PLL recognition by going to this website and setting it to PLL trainer. Then you do the scramble on screen and cover the back and left sides of the cube before trying to look down and see which PLL case you think it is, and then looking away, doing the algorithm, and then looking down to see if you guessed correctly and the cube is solved. With that being said, this is a great way of practicing this skill, but it is mainly built naturally through just doing solves and seeing the cases over and over again in solves. But I would still highly recommend doing some intentional practice to work on this skill. The third step is to practice right. Now, as you probably already know, learning new things and just doing solves is fine up until a certain point, which is around 25 seconds. Once you're here, you want to start implementing some deliberate practice, which is where you do targeted practice based on your own specific weaknesses. And this is what will help you improve all the way down to sub 10 as quickly as possible. These are the 4 most effective deliberate practice drills which I have used and continue to use, which will help you get sub 10 ASAP. And I'll split these up into finding your weaknesses and then fixing them. The first deliberate practice method is walkthrough solves, and these are a great way of finding weaknesses that you don't even know that you have, by being able to see how top cubers would approach different crosses, F12 pairs, or even tricky last layer situations where they might use an advanced algorithm like ZBLL or winter variation. I've linked 4 different walkthrough solve videos in the description, and I challenge you to watch through them and follow along with what they're doing, and think to yourself, what would I do in this situation, and why wouldn't I do what they did? It's a great way of finding things that you don't even know are holding you back. The second deliberate practice method is critiquing your own solves. First, we want to record an average of 12 solves, and we want to do this by finding an angle that you can either film over your shoulder or in a first person angle. Now that we've got our footage, you can upload it to YouTube, and if you don't want anyone else to see it, you can make it unlisted. Then you want to pull up the video and set the playback speed to 0.25. Then you want to watch over all the solves and make notes of any mistakes that you make in your solves. An optional but effective step is to reconstruct all your solves, because it allows you to go back and look at what you did and see if you missed an easy solution or a nicer case. Now that you have your list of mistakes you made, you can go through all of the mistakes and see which ones showed up more than once. If they showed up more than once, it means it's a real weakness, not just a one-off mistake, which would be a waste of effort to work on. Then you can start to think about how you can fix those weaknesses that came up multiple times, which brings us into our next step of deliberate practice methods. The next 2 are about fixing your weaknesses. The first, and in my opinion by far and away the best way of fixing your weaknesses and improving your solves, is through untimed/slow solves. First, let me clarify what I mean by this. I don't just mean turn slow and look ahead. I mean, if you want to work on your inspection, take as long as you like to inspect and plan as much as you possibly can. If you want to work on your F12 decision making, pause between each pair and figure out which one would be the best pair to solve, which pair you'll solve next, and if you need to rotate for the case that you're about to solve. Or if you want to work on building your look ahead capabilities, you can try not to pause the whole solve and just keep turning the whole time, without having the pressure of a timer. As I hope you can see by now, untimed solves are one of the most versatile ways of practicing, because it allows you to focus on anything you want to improve on with just one practice drill. Now that we know what I mean by untimed solves, for most of your weaknesses, you can work on them primarily through untimed solves, slowly getting faster as you get more comfortable with them, until they become part of your solving style and just show up in your timed solves by themselves, because they are just an ingrained habit by then. I have religiously used untimed solves myself since I started cubing to work on all manner of weaknesses, from planning to F2L efficiency, last layer recognition, and much more. The second deliberate practice method for fixing your weaknesses, and this is only relevant to PLLs, but it's so good at fixing your PLLs that I decided I'd include it anyway, and that's PLL time attacks. Now, what a PLL time attack is finding an order for your 21 PLLs. I'll link mine in the description if you want to just copy that. Then you basically time yourself doing all of those PLLs in order as fast as possible, and then that's your PLL time attack time. And you can treat this as any other PB, and you can work on trying beating it over time, and then as you get faster with it, it not only will help your turning in general, but it will also improve your PLLs in your own solves, make them faster, more consistent, and just kind of better overall. And now, the fourth and last step, which I promised in the beginning of the video, the one mistake that I made, which is still hurting my solve times today, and that is not focusing enough on having clean, accurate turning without lockups. And this is a step of its own, simply because of how important it is. If you have bad turning, it'll only get worse in competition, and if you're locking up 2 to 4 times a solve, that's 1 to 2 seconds you're wasting doing absolutely nothing, just because you focus too little on this and you have inaccurate turning. Now this is how you can avoid or fix this, and there's 3 parts to this. The first part is hardware, i.e. the cube that you use. Now if you think about it, if you use a super loose cube, which allows your turning to be super rough and inaccurate, over time your turning will adapt to that, and your turning will become rough and inaccurate. This is the kind of mistake that I made when I averaged around 10 seconds. Using a stable or tighter cube is great for keeping your turning controlled and accurate, because if you don't have much room for error to make mistakes, your brain will quickly adapt and make your turning more accurate and controlled. The second part is having finger trick friendly solutions. Now this goes without saying, but having good finger tricks is essential for being sub-10. But on top of that, you want to make sure that your solutions, especially the ones that you plan in inspection, are finger trick friendly. Now what I mean by that is making sure that you don't overuse B and F moves, try and avoid regrips, and in general find a solution that will flow nicely. The third part is making sure you complete each turn fully before attempting the next one. And what I mean by this is not just get a maglev cube and hope for the best. I mean actually doing solves where you focus on making sure you turn each layer fully before you start the next turn. Now with these 3 tips, you should be able to fix your turning or avoid bad turning in the first place. Alright, now that we have everything we need to be sub-10 laid out in front of us, we just need to put it into action and practice as much as possible. The more specific, targeted practice you do, the faster you will improve. So my final piece of advice is to take a cue with you wherever you go, and whenever you can, fit some practice in, and you'll be sub-10 before you know it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.